Okay. So yeah, this is going to have to be a triple act. So we've had a bit of a shuffle around in the southwest. So I'm Grant. I was the former community archaeologist. Now I'm the Discovery Programme Officer for South Devon, taking on from Therese, which is why we're having to do this. Caroline's gone from the Sonar Harbours Discovery Programme Officer to become the big boss as the project manager. So we've had a very big kind of shuffle around. So that's why you're going to see quite a few of us come up to present different bits. We've got Stephen, a great volunteer, who's also going to be a bit. So there will also be a new community archaeology who will join us next month on the project. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, this is where Devon is. It's down here. Deepest, commonly called deepest part is Devon. The Discovery Zone is all the way from Sidmouth to Wembury. It's mainly concentrating around the estuaries, the Exe, the Team, and the Dart. But we do also have the Kingsbridge estuary. I think it's I always get this wrong, the Elm, the Avon, and the Erne as well. So we'll be covering all of it. It's one of the largest discovery programs by a mile. So it's all that coastline and all of those estuaries. So we do plan in the next 2 years to cover it. So this coastline is famous for its wrecking, it's famous for its pubs, admittedly. It's famous for various industries and a historic connection to the sea. All of these different estuaries have a real connection to the sea, and the people themselves still have a very fondness of being out on the water and doing stuff out there. So, I'm going to lead into Therese now, but intrigue and opportunity. So I think like many of my colleagues, we had to go through a few different iterations of how we were going to fit intrigue and opportunity into what we've been doing in 2019. I wanted to go with interpretive dance at first, but we weren't allowed. But yeah, eventually we realised that intrigue and opportunity is actually kind of the story of my own career and how I approach archaeology. Because the intrigue, the most common question on the foreshore is, what the hell is it? Like, that is the most common question. And that's usually where I start with any survey is, what the hell is that? And then I usually create an opportunity to get people out there to study it and get that story. So what we kind of go for is, archaeology is a mechanism of storytelling. It's a storytelling mechanism where you study the archaeology to get that story out, and that's very much, and when there's such local sites, which, as Therese will talk about in a moment, one of the biggest intrigues I always had in Devon as a kid is these, which is a lime kiln. And Therese will explain these in a second. Because they're just weird structures from the foreshore, and as a child they're fascinating. But without further introduction, I'll pass you over to Therese.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So as Grant said, I started the project as the Discovery Programme Officer for Devon and have since moved to the Solent. And Devon was very much a new area for me, and I became absolutely obsessed with lime kilns just because they're really, really remarkable and beautiful structures. And the lime industry in Devon was really important, particularly from like the 17th century right up until the early part of the 20th century. And there are these types of features where once you see one, when you walk around the landscape, they just are popping out at you everywhere. So there are hundreds of examples in Devon and also over into Cornwall. And they're really, as you can see here, this, apologies, there's no dedication to this, one of the volunteers sent this to us. But they were really focal structures, not least because they gave off a lot of heat, but also a lot of noxious fumes. And stories are told of homeless people, for example, falling asleep around the fire, falling in, or dying from carbon monoxide poisoning. The calcination, or the lime burning process, is a really simple chemistry, and you're basically burning a calcium carbonate material, which is usually limestone or chalk, adding heat to it of temperatures around 900 degrees, and you're burning off carbon dioxide, so you're left with calcium oxide or quicklime. And what's really remarkable, although it's a very simple process, is the large variety of uses that the material has. I suppose most famously it's used for manufacture of lime water or plaster, also lime wash, and I certainly remember my grandmother washing her house or painting her house every Easter time with whitewash, but also used as a cleanser in the tanning industry, for example. And between the 17th and 20th century in Devon, it was used to sweeten the soil, which basically means that it was just reducing the acidity. Sometimes you hear it referred to as a fertilizer, but it's not a fertilizer. It does, however, mechanically affect the soil, so it makes the soil slightly more porous so that nutrients can filter through. So really, really important to the rural economy of Devon. The very earliest examples we have date to the Roman period, and in this period the kilns are a much simpler construct. They're basically just layers of limestone, and it could be charcoal, it could be wood, it could be coal, very much like a charcoal burning process, so covered over with some turf. And there are only 2 examples of Roman kilns in Devon to date, and one is very recently this example over here, quite unusually in an urban context, but was excavated last year. Throughout the 16th, 17th century, you see the evolution of the kiln until you get into these really elaborate structures. And so they basically work by the charge goes into the top here. There's this big, this big chamber or pot layered very carefully, and the work of the lime burner was very, very specialized. It wasn't just dumping it all in and burning it. It had to be weighed very carefully. As you can see here, the kind of a rough estimate for this type of size of kiln, 4 tons of limestone and 1.5 tons of fuel, which resulted in about 2 tons of lime. And so they're really intriguing because they seem to have an evolution over time. So the front arch here is mainly, I suppose, for protection of the lime worker, because it's calcium oxide is a really volatile substance. So if water gets onto it, it will just explode. So the process is charges down, burns for at least 24 to 36 hours, then left to cool, and then the lime is drawn out through the straw hole here. So quite a hefty process. One of the reasons that we decided to focus on these through consultation with the county archaeologist Bill Horner in Devon was because we have hundreds of examples, and this is the HER record for Devon, but you can see that they stop. There's a big bare patch, if you like, but we know from our visits that there are hundreds of kilns in there, so we'd really like to extend that record, think about their distribution, and think about how they have evolved over time. They're mostly focused on around the coast and estuaries, simply because, I suppose, ease of transport, bulk limestone being brought in by boat, and then the lime was carted off usually with a pack horse. And some of them, it's different states of repair, certainly. This one, for example, on the Erm estuary, you can see it sits right on the beach, and it's eroding at a rate of knots. This is one of my favorites. It's in Mansands, and again, this beach is extending back, so eventually it will go. And you can often see the lower courses are very much in a pretty poor state. So these are just a few of the examples. We also have some beautiful kind of associated infrastructure. This is at Orkin Point. Sorry, you can't see anything. Just by Exmouth, and these are wheel ruts. And when they were first described to me, I was thinking wheel ruts. I was expecting 2 little scratches that somebody had interpreted, but they're monsters, and they come and go. They disappear. The beach covers them. They reappear. And the day that we were there, this was in February 2019. We measured about 64 meters of wheel ruts, and these were used to facilitate the transport of lime across the beach up into the nearby kiln. But in July 2019, Grant and I went back, and they had completely disappeared, because we're all documentaries, we know they're here. So it's a really nice site to continue to monitor to see other areas that come up. They're also really beautiful because you see a lot of reuse of these, and this is part of Bow Creek, a little village called Tuckenhay, and somebody's kitchen is in the middle of the kiln. You see this example here, people use it for sheds and boat storage and all sorts of other things, and the one below here is transformed into a games room. So we started our very first training session in Devon focusing on these kilns. These 2 are under Waterhead Creek. This photograph is taken in the 1980s, and this one around 2015. So you see that they have developed, if you like. They've had doors put on, and they've been used for boat storage. These 2 appear in the 1816 tide map, and this lovely convention, this drawing convention that you see all along these maps. So we know that that certainly existed before then. And then this, just further up the creek, we have this example. It doesn't appear on the map. But we spent a really excellent 2 days doing a little bit of theory and going out and about surveying them. And then we did a follow-up workshop at another example at Galton Creek, which is very lovely. Part of the beauty of working in Devon and starting a new discovery program is developing the links and going out and meeting the people. And we were really, really blessed, and still are, by meeting John Brisden, who is a local historian who really helped us. He did an introductory talk on the wine industry. He's done a lot of research. And also to the team from the South Devon area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, who took the time to take Grant and I around for a tour and to show us some sites that might have been of interest. And we are very, very delighted that one of the people who came along with us in the training session, Stephen Peart, has travelled all the way from Devon to be with us. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about his experience volunteering for CITiZAN. And after following Stephen, Grant will just tell us about the future work for sorry, South Devon Rivers.
It's the other one.
It's the other one. I'm telling you that one later.
It's the job we used to have.
So please, very warm welcome.
Hi. So, volunteering in the South Devon Rivers. It's been about 20 years since I've stood up in front of this many people and talked, so please bear with me. I've also got a very strong sense of imposter syndrome because I've never really had any interest in archaeology. And having worked with Grant and Therese for 6 months, I've got a slight bit more interest in archaeology, but not that much. And I think what I want to say today is about how I've come to volunteer and why I'm going to carry on volunteering and why it's important to me. I'm a photographer, working mainly in landscapes and working on Dartmoor. And I'm developing a long-form project which is based around a poem by Alice Oswald on the River Dart. And this looks at the river from its source high up on Dartmoor, all the way down through Dartmoor, through the South Hams, and coming out at Dartmouth. And up on Dartmoor, I live on Dartmoor. It's a landscape I know, it's a landscape I understand, and I can, to a degree, read the landscape, which you need to be able to do to take decent photographs and create good images. But what I started to discover last year, as I moved off the moor and moved into the South Hams and Totnes and down towards the coast, the river was simply becoming more and more noisy. There were all sorts of things going on the river. There had, over hundreds of years, been activities, events, and I just couldn't understand the landscape. At which point a friend sent me a link through to the CITiZAN website and said, well, why don't you talk to these people? So I saw there was a call for volunteers. I put my name forward. And I volunteered with other organisations previously. I'm not going to name them. And it had become slightly disheartening because you send in your application, they say thank you very much, you're now a volunteer, your name's on our database, maybe you get a PDF file, maybe you get a link to a website, but that's it. You're kind of told, oh, go out there and let us know how you get on. There seems to be a lot of that. But having emailed Therese, I got an email back from her about 2 days later saying, well, I have to come on a workshop. And come on a workshop, learn what it is that I'm supposed to be doing, learn about the organisation, and actually do some hands-on work, which is a very different approach than that I'd seen from others. So I thought about it for a while. I still had some hesitations about archaeology, but I thought, what the hell? And turned up for the workshop, which took place early August, I think it was. The first day was classroom-based, theory, practice, health and safety, the history of lime kilns. We do a lot of lime kilns. And then on the second day, we were taken out, as you've seen in the images, and made to get on with it. it wasn't, we weren't there as passive observers. Grant and Therese were supervising us, obviously, because quite a lot of the time we didn't really know what we were doing. But it was very hands-on. We were made to get stuck in and do things. And I think that also, it showed to the volunteers that the organisation was serious about us volunteering. It wasn't simply, as I've said before, it wasn't a numbers game. And then after that, several emails from Teresa inviting us to go out and actually conduct site surveys. Grant with his various boats up and down inlets of the Dart. And it's been it's a relationship that they're constantly building upon. They're constantly calling us out to help out and to get involved. But we know that when we go out, we're not going to be sitting there watching. We are there to do a job of work. And so we feel as volunteers that we've been invested in. And because we feel we've been invested in, we feel that there's an obligation. You know, CITiZAN have taken time, money, resources to put into us. So it's time for us to put those things back. And obviously I get things out of it as well. I mean, these email conversations are two-way. I can pester Therese and Grant about all sorts of questions as to what's going up and down the length of the Dart. I can get access to shorelines that I wouldn't necessarily get access to otherwise because they're on private property. And I also, and this is again to all who are watching the film about the crofters, I also get to talk to the other volunteers, several of whom are members of local history societies, several of whom have lived in the area for a lot longer than I have, and I can learn from that. So it's very constructive, it's a very dynamic relationship, and a very positive thing.